The Drawing of the Three was the second of the Dark Tower novels, and, well, this book is a lot. From carnivorous crustaceans to blood-soaked shootouts, harrowing journeys, alternate realities, and multiple intersecting timelines, there is just so much going on. But it's King's representation of drug addiction and his use of arguably racist stereotypes that stood out the most amongst the novel's concurrent themes. Hi there, I'm your host, Mr. Doyle, and this is a great undertaking. If you enjoy Stephen King content, the Dark Tower saga, and watching a visibly uncomfortable white guy struggle to discuss the use of racial stereotypes and the N-word in Stephen King's writing, please drop a like and consider subscribing to the channel. The first time I attempted to discuss the Dark Tower saga, I inadvertently came to the realization that while I respect and appreciate the crafting and care that went into the novels, which were written and published over the span of decades and are beloved by so many constant readers, the Dark Tower books are not really for me. As I mentioned in my previous video for The Eyes of the Dragon, the fantasy realm is just not a genre I am typically interested in. That's not to say the Dark Tower saga is your typical fantasy experience, though. I mean, the books are all so varied from one another that to simply categorize them with a label as generic as fantasy seems inadequate. The Drawing of the Three alone, which was published in 1987, defies the notion that it could be lumped in alongside what we might think of as being part of the traditional fantasy genre. There are no dragons, no medieval vibes, no knights, elves, centaurs, minotaurs, fairies, sprites, etc. The Drawing of the Three, while certainly maintaining a firm footing in the fantastic, at its heart is about people, their struggles with finding acceptance with each other, their intimately individual internal struggles with themselves, and the societal stigmas that are placed upon them. And it is through two particular characters, Eddie and Odetta, that King explores these internal struggles and preconceived notions. But before we get into the perils of drug addiction, problematic racial stereotypes, and King's liberal use of what may be considered the most controversial offensive word in the English language, let's check out a short synopsis of The Drawing of the Three and what led King to write it. The Drawing of the Three, a brief summary. The gunslinger awakens alone on a beach. The man in black has fled, leaving Roland to fend for himself against an immediate danger which is emerging from the vastness of the sea. He is irreparably injured in the struggle, and as he searches for respite and rescue, nearly giving up his will to survive and his quest for the tower, he comes upon an out-of-place door seemingly standing of its own volition on the beach. It is the first of three doors beyond which lies not only the gunslinger's salvation, but which hold untold worlds, fateful encounters, and the members of what will become his quartet, his one made from many. History and inspiration. As I mentioned earlier, and as many of you already know, The Drawing of the Three was the second novel in the Dark Tower series. I sorta made a video for the first Dark Tower novel, which was of course The Gunslinger, but that video is admittedly less than informative about the history and inspiration of the novel, and more about my own personal reservations about making videos about the Dark Tower. So for anyone looking for a thorough history lesson of the Gunslinger and its unconventional path to publication, There is a link in the description below to a video by The Horror Show. Similarly, The Horror Show has done a video for the drawing of the three, and rather than recap and reiterate everything that Jaime and Fuego had already covered 5 years ago, I've linked to that video below as well. Both of those videos provide information about King's inspiration, plot breakdowns of each novel, and even some light criticisms, which I don't disagree with. So if you're looking for that style of content, I recommend both of those videos. Just be aware they are essentially 20-minute long spoiler videos, so don't watch them if you haven't read the books already. I hope this doesn't seem lazy or like I'm passing the buck, but I just don't have much interest in putting in the effort to cover all the same info that someone else has already made available 5 years ago. I'd prefer to focus on 2 particular characters, or rather 3 characters technically, that King writes into the story who I consider to be the most interesting and controversial parts of the drawing of the three. Eddie Dean and the Stigma of Addiction. Before I get started, I just want to mention that this section may seem off-topic or irrelevant to the drawing of the three at first, but I assure you it's all relevant to the story. While I was rereading the drawing of the three and was being reintroduced to Eddie Dean, who is a heroin addict, the city I work in and live just outside of became the first city in New York State to install a naloxone dispenser. Naloxone, or Narcan, is essentially an antidote to opioid drugs and can treat narcotic overdoses. And, well, the installation of the vending machine wasn't exactly well received by everyone. Someone I know posted a picture of an article regarding the Narcan dispenser on Facebook with a caption simply reading, "Speechless," in all caps. It seems my Facebook friend was not on board with the dispenser, and the majority of comments that followed his post were likewise not enthusiastic about the life-saving medication being readily available in their community. Of the 127 comments at the time of writing, the general sentiment of those who were opposed to the vending machine seemed to be that those with opioid addiction issues who experience an accidental overdose deserve to die, and that providing these folks with potentially life-saving antidotes was tantamount to encouraging people to do heroin, which is definitely not how addiction typically works. Regardless, there was a flurry of commenters who were just disgusted that this life-saving medication was being offered to those whose lives were at risk. Not everyone felt that way, of course. Some folks told their own stories in an effort to help those who were fine with the prospect of people dying to understand that most folks don't decide to become addicted. It's their life circumstances, physical pain, and mental trauma that made them susceptible to the allure of drugs. Should they be made to suffer and die because of a mistake, of a choice made in the midst of immense trauma and suffering? My personal favorite comment in defense of the vending machine came from an actual close friend of mine who simply said, quote, "Maybe someone's child or sibling might get to live long enough to turn their life around," unquote. And much like my good friend, someone who wants people to have a chance to recover rather than to resign them to being better off dead, in the story of the drawing of the three, Roland the Gunslinger sees the good in Eddie Dean. He doesn't abandon him because of his addiction. He doesn't disregard him or devalue him. He sees him as someone worth saving, someone worth fighting for and fighting alongside. Roland understands that Eddie has a problem and that, as a result, Eddie isn't his strongest, most trustworthy self, but Roland is willing to do what he can to get Eddie clean and to help him. He also understands that Eddie's unfortunate circumstances, his brother's negative influence, and the environment he grew up in have led him to this point, but he doesn't see Eddie as being irreparably damaged. He doesn't give up on him. He may admonish him on occasion. He may use a bit of what one might consider tough love as well, but he also cares and, in his own way, loves Eddie, and he's willing to do what it takes to save him from his demons. And I just wish that was the prevailing attitude in that volatile comment section about the Narcan dispenser, rather than "fuck them, it's their own fault, let them die." If your knee-jerk response to people not dying of drug overdoses is to get irrationally angry at those suffering from drug addiction, you may want to reevaluate who you are. You're likely not the good person you think of yourself as. Maybe try some compassion and empathy instead. Someday it might be your sibling or your child or your loved one that is struggling with addiction. And I sure hope you would want them to have the chance to survive long enough to overcome it. Odetta Holmes and Detta Walker, King and Racist Stereotypes. Okay, so before this segment begins in earnest, I just want to say that I don't think that Stephen King is a racist. At least, not in the outwardly vocal white supremacist kind of way. But there may be some implicit aversive racism that causes some stereotypical black characters to appear throughout King's writing with regularity. From Mother Abigail in The Stand and Dick Halloran in The Shining, to John Coffey in The Green Mile, more recently Jerome Robinson of the Mr. Mercedes Bill Hodges trilogy, and of course Detta Walker from The Drawing of the Three, King has often written black characters in ways that could be seen as unenlightened, perhaps insensitive, problematic, and to some maybe just plain racist. There's a great video by Princess Weeks entitled, okay, I'm going to say this out loud, "The Magical Negroes of Stephen King," that goes into detail about a number of black King characters, their usefulness to their white protagonist counterparts, and how King maybe stumbles and fumbles when he writes about these characters of color. This video is from the perspective of a person of color, so I feel that Princess Weeks' thoughts on the matter perhaps offer a more worthwhile, relevant perspective than I, a very white person, can provide. Check her video out in the description. It is funny and insightful and reasonably critical of King's use of black characters, tropes, tokenization, and representation of people of color. Okay, so having said all that, and this is a character that Princess Weeks doesn't touch on in her video, Detta Walker, the split personality of the Gentile, polite, kind-hearted Odetta Holmes, is an explicit caricature of a black woman from the South during the Civil Rights era, and is perhaps King's most blatant, overblown, potentially racist characterization of any character he has ever dreamt up. I mean, her dialogue in this story is really something else. King adopts a black scent while writing Detta that, frankly, I don't really know how to adequately describe, so I've invited a friend of mine to join me in this video to help explore the character of Detta Walker and King's characterization of her further. My friend's name is Erika, and she is a person of color, and I wanted to get her unfiltered reaction to some of the dialogue King uses while writing Detta Walker. I am willing to admit that a white dude reading this portion of dialogue aloud will likely make it 100 times worse, but since it was written by a white guy, I felt it made the most sense to read the dialogue to Erika myself rather than give it to her to read. Oh, and I also made sure to ask her how she, a person of color, felt about boomer white dudes using the N-word in their writing. And full disclosure, I wasn't sure what to expect in regards to just what her reaction would be, but Erika doesn't hold back ever, and that's one of the reasons I love her. So here we go. Okay, so I'm going to read you some quotes from this character that Stephen King created, and I'm not going to give you any context because I just want to see what your knee-jerk reaction to this will be.
Okay.
And so after I do that, and you've told me how it made you feel, I'm then going to explain the context to you, and then you can tell me if that changes how you felt about it at all.
Okay.
All right.
I'm in.
Because frankly, like, it's a lot, and I was like, wow, I don't feel entirely like my opinion on this is necessarily the right one, or if there is a right one. I mean, obviously, you speak for all people of color, and how
obviously I'm the queen.
How you feel is how everyone will feel. So this character is so outrageously cartoonish. I'm either about to make you laugh so hard when I read this, or offend you more than you've ever been offended in your life.
I'm either gonna laugh or I'm gonna riot. Or
yeah,
maybe both.
I hope a little of each.
Okay.
Like laugh till you cry, and then like punch a small innocent animal or something like that.
I have 3 cats surrounding me right now, so like I'm ready to go.
I almost said punch a baby, but then I remembered you actually have a baby, and she just went to sleep.
She's in the other room.
She's safe
for now.
I was gonna say that for now. Okay, so I may stumble a bit because the dialect that this is written in is so ridiculously like. All right, no more explaining. Here we go. All right. I practiced this once this morning when no one else was home. And now my wife is sitting upstairs where she's definitely going to hear me. And I did not tell her what I was about to be doing down here. So I'm looking forward to getting her reaction as well.
Perfect.
Okay, so here we go. This is Erika's unfiltered reaction with no context.
Okay.
You ain't nothing but a bunch of honky sons of bitches. Gonna kill every motherfucking honky I see. Gonna geld them first. Gonna cut off their balls and spit them in their faces.
Okay, so that's the first passage. I got 2 more. I'm gonna read them both. 2 more.
Why don't you go on and eat each other's cocks? Why don't you just go on and do that if you afraid of a black woman's cunny? You just go on, show. Suck on each other's candles. Do it while you got a chance, cause Detta Walker gonna get out in this chair and cut them skinny old white candles off and feed them to those walking buzzsaws down there.
Okay, so there's one more passage.
Morning, white bread. Thought you was gonna sleep till noon. You can't be doing nothing like that, can you? We got to bust us some miles here. Ain't that the fact of the matter? Show. And I think you're the one gonna have to do most of the busting, cause that other fella, one with the voodoo eyes, he looking mo peaky all the time. I declare he do. Yes, I don't think he gonna be eating anything much longer, not even that fancy smoked meat you white bread boys keep for when you done joiking on each other's one's little bitty white candles. So let's go, white bread. Detta don't want to be done. Detta don't want to be the one keeping you. So, Erika, how did that make you feel?
What?
Okay.
Okay, so, okay, like, you know, my guess would be this is like some like form of caricature of like a Southern Black person. I don't know. Has he met Southern Black people? Also, there's a lot of.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Listen, a lot of my family, they're from Oklahoma, and they don't talk about white dudes' dicks that much. That's a lot. Like, I don't. Like, I mean, I don't. That.
Okay. Okay. So, without the context, you're clearly confused. You're puzzled. Did it feel maybe a little racist? Maybe a little like a stereotypical caricature of a Southern Black woman?
It feels exactly like if you asked a boomer white man what Black people are like in the South. Like, this is what would come out, and you're like, "Have you ever met a Black person?" And then their answer would always be like, "Oh yeah, I went to school with." No.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, King is a boomer, and he is from Maine, which I believe is the whitest state in the country, if I'm not mistaken.
I went to Maine, and I pretty much waited the whole time to get hate crimed. I was like, "Ooh, I don't know if I'm allowed to be here." Like, it's beautiful, but like...
Gotcha. Okay, well, now you kind of unintentionally hit the nail on the head, like, right away. So here's the context. There is a woman, her name is Odetta Holmes.
Of course.
She has a split personality that she is unaware of. And this Odetta Holmes is a Gentile, comely woman of the South. She is also of color, but she's a civil rights activist, but she's well off, she's wealthy, and doesn't really interact with the Po. She doesn't interact with the lower class people, although she is a civil rights fighter and everything. She's out of touch with the poor. And so the alternate personality here is this construct of her mind, this construction that she has of what a lower class Black woman is. So, knowing all of that and knowing who King is, does that change your thoughts or feelings about this character in any way?
Here's my main thought and feeling on it. Why is any of this fucking necessary? Like, who asked you? Number one, you are a white boomer. Like, who are you to speak on the Black experience from either end of the spectrum? Please be quiet. And like, when you're addressing like the intricacies of like wealth and poverty within the Black community and like colorism and stuff, like, that's not white people's business. That's our business. We'll handle it amongst ourselves, and we don't really need your 70-year-old white opinion on it, nor your little, like, you, this man has, how many books has he written? Calm down. Stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. Do what you do. You don't need to do this.
Yeah.
No. This.
Yeah. I thought to myself, I wonder if this added context will really make a difference in Erika's thoughts and feelings of this character. And I, of course, I wanted to get that unfiltered response and then see if it changed at all. And I certainly didn't, I couldn't predict how this would make you feel entirely, but I didn't think it would.
Always, why are white men? Why? Guys. Why? Y'all want... Stop. I just... That's what? Not... Mr. King, this is not it.
Okay.
thank you for that. And there's one more thing I wanted to touch on, and it's a question that I found myself asking about the N-word.
Oh, yeah.
Which is used a lot in this book as well.
Of course it is.
And so I thought to myself, obviously, white dudes should not say that. There's really no context in which me should be saying that word. And I thought, is it different if you're writing it in literature? I mean, obviously, this book came out in '87, so the rules have changed. Whether or not they were ever good or okay back then, different story, different topic. But like, obviously, if Stephen King wrote a song and he was writing it from the perspective of someone else and he was dropping the N-bomb in there, that would not be okay. If he said it in casual conversation, also not okay. In writing, though, like, is there a...
At this point, like, I understand it's been used in the classics and, like, it's read in schools because there are no other options, because Black people weren't allowed to write books or have them published or have art or money or goddamn anything. At this point, like, no, shut up, stop. Nobody, there is nothing so earth-shattering that Stephen King can offer to the world while using the N-word, because number one, it's not your word to use. Number two, unless you're Black, you shouldn't use the word. You don't understand the nuance of the word. You don't understand the appropriateness of the word. Like, nobody needs all this. Like, you have made millions and millions of dollars. Calm down, sit down, stay in your lane. Nobody needs your opinion on the white. No one needs another boomer white man's opinion on, well, I'm writing like a historical based word, so I can use that. Stop. Your story is not that important. It is not more important than the harm that has been done with that word by people who look just like you. Just no.
Thank you for that honest opinion. And I have a hard time disagreeing with anything you just said. Also, at this point in his career, he was very wealthy. So at first I tried to excuse it as, okay, he's trying to look at it in like a classist kind of way, and then he started bringing in the N-bomb pretty regularly, and I was just like, man, I don't know if the rules for literature have really been established, but it might be time for us to do that.
Well, and the rules of literature have been always predominantly to serve, rich white men. That needs to stop.
So you mean like everything else? Like not just literature, obviously.
That kind of everything. It's just, we know that view. We've heard it for a very long time from a lot of different people, and like, it's the same old story. Like, stop. You have millions of dollars. You can stop now.
All right. I don't disagree. Unfortunately, he does it a lot, it turns out. I'm going to say a word right now that I'm very uncomfortable saying, but King has a problem with what is known as the magical Negro showing up a lot in his stories.
Oh, yes. Well, we're like side characters, little side quests where we help the main character with their development and, multifacetedness and, it's...
Yeah, there's a great video I would love to send you, which I will also be discussing in the video that I'm putting up, by a woman of color,
about the whole Stephen King has a problem with using this trope and tokenization of people of color, like often. Like, I can think of 6 examples off the top of my head.
Yep.
So that's why I kind of felt like doing this. As a fan of Stephen King's writing, I am not going to, I'm not a Stephen King apologist either.
Listen, when I went from reading like Goosebumps books to Stephen King, like within a month. So like, I get it. We all love the story. Like, it's your first introduction to horror. Like, it's palatable enough that like it becomes popular, but it doesn't mean like, it's 2022. We're trying to do better. We're trying to grow, and the dinosaurs got to stop dinosauring.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it. I'm going to keep recording, but I'm just going to edit this part out. But thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Yeah. The more I kept writing, the more I was like, I'm not qualified to speak on this. So yeah, I needed that voice to come in and really and add some perspective for me. I'm 40-year-old white man. I am not as guilty as Stephen King here, but I can't think the way you do about these things with that nuance,
No, and that's the difference. And like, there's areas in my life where like I'm working on growing. Like, we're all just trying to do a little better.
Right on. Well, I will say in Stephen King's defense, he's been out there fighting J.K. Rowling on Twitter about the whole trans rights and non-binary people are relevant thing.
Listen, he will get a cookie I will mail him like an edible arrangements thing. Like, don't fight her on Twitter. Fight her in the streets. Knock her the fuck. You got the kind of money that you're going to get out of jail. Just go slap her.
That's true. He can pretty much do and say whatever he wants at this point in his life. So, come on, Stephen. Choke J.K. Rowling out.
Let's do this.
I'm definitely putting this part in the video. That has to go in there.
Like I said earlier, I wasn't entirely sure just how Erika would feel about all of this, or if after getting a better understanding of the context, her feelings would change. But yeah, I thank you, Erika, for providing the perspective that I could not. And as a 40-year-old white dude, and considering Erika's thoughts on the matter, I feel the best thing for me to do is to shut the fuck up about this particular topic now. Just make sure to go watch that Princess Weeks video after this one, link below. Final thoughts. If you haven't noticed, this isn't your typical horror Stephen King booktuber channel. I'm trying to have deeper, sometimes uncomfortable conversations about King books, so if this sort of content isn't for you, I get it. But if you made it this far in the video, then I appreciate you sticking around. If you're looking for some more straightforward content, go subscribe to The Horror Show. They do a great job and have literally hundreds of King-related videos, many of which are Dark Tower related. They'll scratch your Dark Tower Stephen King booktuber itch if I'm just not doing it for you. I'll be back next week with the first video in my series for Misery, which will most likely be about toxic fandoms, stans, and will have very little to do with the book itself. Sorry. New videos drop every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so please subscribe to the channel to get notifications. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. Okay, goodbye. Be sure to click like and subscribe to the channel for my continued analysis of all things Stephen King, pretty pleased with blood and guts on top. My name is Mr. Doyle, and this has been a great undertaking.